Chris Whalen CPA is here to talk to us about mandates and how, if you're a business owner and you still are mandating the COVID vaccine years later and after the CDC has totally reversed course, and even places like New York City have um, dropped their private business employee mandate, which I heard was the strictest in the country, Chris. And you're
Yeah.
from that part of the country. But if you're still one of those employers, like my old employer who fired me, but they're government, so we could talk about how that's different than private in a second. Why, Chris, do you think that you could face bankruptcy? We're going to get into that in 1 second, but first I want you to just tell everybody why Chris Whalen CPA is somebody that anyone should listen to anyway on this topic. Take it away.
Well, I've been doing taxes and business work since 1987 when I was getting out of college. And my main focus all day is just business and business work around the country. We come in to consult on all types of matters for businesses, taxes, operations, from a tax and accounting perspective. And we're not just the run of the mill, 1040 kind of mill firm. We do a lot of investment property work too. So have a lot of experience, many years experience, been licensed as a CPA since 1990. And if you're looking for advice that's objective about what you're doing in your business world, you definitely want to give us a call. I often say that, you're if you don't hire us, you're really not being as effective as you can be. I know that's self-serving, but that's what I normally say.
Hey, you got to market somehow. I'm bad. Maybe you can help me marketing my wine and coffee later, since you seem to be better at self promotion than I am. Okay, so let's go to this article that I was just showing earlier. COVID rules in New York City change. What to know as vaccine mandate ends. And the subtext is: the Democratic mayor of New York City faced significant backlash earlier this year after dropping the mandate for professional athletes and performers, but not other private sector employees. The latter is over now, but the rule remains in place for 300,000 city workers. And we are going to talk about the lawsuit that the sanitation workers won, and they're going to allegedly get their jobs back with back pay, or at least that's what the ruling said. We'll talk about how that affects all of this. But let's go to not just a New York City thing, but this is happening around the country. You're seeing rules relaxed in some cases, especially since the CDC has decided that it's not going to consider vaccinated and unvaccinated people as different categories because of breakthrough infections and whatnot. And yet you still have employers that are hanging on to these mandates. So as you just told people what you specialize in, like you're saying, basically, if you're still doing this, there could be significant liability on your end. Why is that?
All right. Well, because now it's not a mandate by a government agency, right? So let's say that you now are going to enforce the mandate on your own, and you're telling your employees that they need to get this intervention, if you will, or they won't be able to be employed with you any longer. So that's really a force of coercion, I believe. And so if they could possibly bring a wrongful termination type suit against you, the discrimination, harassment suit. And this goes well beyond workers' comp. We have to remember that if they are injured by that intervention, by the vaccine, workers' comp is the first avenue where they would go. And most employers know that, but they don't know that that doesn't stop them from suing you in other ways, in different courts. And so one of the main ways they would want to sue you is by doing a wrongful termination suit, let's say based on religious discrimination, for example, if you wanted to opt out because of a religious exemption. And so most small employers and medium ones don't have the right insurance. It's employment practices liability insurance. And so what happens is where the bankruptcy comes in, let's say that you have one employee who sues you this way, right? You have no coverage, which means you have no legal fee coverage. And these kind of cases could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, which not a lot of business owners, even medium ones, have. So you have to be very careful at this point. If you do want to institute a mandate, which I strongly suggest against doing, make sure you have your insurances in place and you've conferred with the appropriate labor attorneys and proper commercial insurance agents to make sure you're covered in case you do get sued.
Okay, so let's go to let's talk about real fast when you were discussing the injuries. Uh, one might say that even back when the government the government, I guess, I don't know who that would be, like when the Biden administration or when the CDC had their particular recommendations. It was that what, when you say that, is that what you say was the cover for these businesses, or was it their state or local like health authorities, as
Well,
YouTube said?
even with, I mean, well, the government mandate did give some cover again,
You
and
mean the
that would have,
federal?
right, they
Okay.
definitely, and that would have given, even in that case, if people were injured, that's a different conversation than if someone did not want to get vaccinated and they were fired. So there's two different situations here, right? One's where you are injured because you did do it, you did get the vaccine, then you have a workers' comp issue. But if you refuse to get it and you were fired, then you have a wrongful termination suit. So there's two ways. But the main way I'm talking about is people that did not get vaccinated that were terminated, like sanitation workers, for example, you mentioned.
Mhm.
And so they're not injured physically because they refused. That's why they're fired. But that's where this other type of very large possible court case can come against you for wrongful termination. They might lose, it might be frivolous, but that doesn't stop you from having to pay your own legal fees, which business owners are not thinking of.
Mhm. You don't think they think of that?
No, I mean, I've talked to new business owners every day. They've never had a harassment claim. They've never had a discrimination claim. So of course they don't want to pay no one wants to pay insurance for anything. Right. So in this case, so they don't know that this could span almost all their employees if they don't want to get this done and they're going to walk off the job. So no, they're not thinking of this. Most companies should have this anyway for sexual harassment, which is common, can happen any day. And most companies do not have this insurance at all. 99% of companies that come hire me will not pay for this insurance. They don't think it's necessary.
Okay, let's talk real fast too about the lawsuits that you just brought that up. The New York State judge reinstates fired sanitation workers who did not comply with New York City's vaccination mandate. This from CNN. I've done a couple videos about this. Had the reporter that was in the courthouse for this talking about it. One thing that I think originally there were some news outlets like the Epic Times got wrong about it was that it was going to mean that all New York City workers were going to get their jobs back with back pay. And what the case really centered on was the 16
Right.
plaintiffs in the case. However, it could set for future law. So what do you think about this case? Like how should business owners interpret this for what they could face in the
Right.
future?
Well, the important part of this is that I don't think that any state really wants to give up the mandate. I think that the science is so strong against it that they had to comply. They had to comply and say that's no longer necessary because the evidence against the necessity for this, if you know what I'm saying, is so strong right now. So if New York State has done this, I tell my clients, well, then if they're doing this, then you should follow suit with what they're doing, right? Just as you followed suit when there was a mandate, okay, we complied. Now they're saying it's no longer necessary. Why not comply with it now? And so, like, again, the fact that New York State has done this shows that it's so clear what the truth is about all of these interventions, if you will, for the past few years. What the truth is, they're quickly turning and running away from it.
Okay, let me go to locals real fast because there were some interesting questions for you, and I guess I should tell everybody, don't forget to go to AllisonMorrow.locals.com where you can submit interview questions ahead of time. I do want to make sure I need to go through some of these just to make sure they're YouTube worthy. Otherwise, we will be. I've been told I'm not supposed to say we're just going to cut the stream. We're not YouTube. We're not trying to evade censorship or anything. We just like it better over there, right? Okay, let me look it up because there were a lot of interesting questions specific to the time. I think how time affects all of these policies, like, and the media. And I think that's maybe before I even get to those questions. Let's talk about the media real fast, okay? Because we're 2 years, 2 and almost 3, right? Yeah, almost 3 years past when we were all beginning to talk about it. Because I remember it was the beginning of 2020, and we're almost at the end of 2022, starting into 2023. I can't believe how fast it's all gone by. How does public support or the lack thereof and in a lot of ways driven by media coverage and the news people are reading. How does that affect what you're talking about here? Not just from the perspective of like business owners, they just think everybody's on their side. So it's safety in numbers, I guess. I'm just curious because it seems like a lot of the people that I talk to on these podcasts have justice based on public opinion, one way or the other, whether it's the lack thereof or they do get justice because people are in support of them. But it seems like the court systems and judges, it's very sort of hit or miss. And I've had attorneys say that's in part why they don't bring cases based on science, because there's too much left up for interpretation. They bring it based on constitutional law. And because I guess they feel like it's easier to argue that they are folks overstepping constitutional rights than arguing science, because there's a lot of fear among even judges that if they decide in favor of somebody who may be on the unpopular side of the, trust the science debate, then they're going to be exposed to all the negative repercussions that other people have. And so you can't necessarily trust judges or the courts to rule in favor of that. So let's talk real fast about that. Like, what do you think about public opinion and time since we've started all this and how that affects liability for businesses? Does it matter at all?
Well, I think it matters a great deal because 2 years ago, I think, everyone felt there was these absolute truths about the situation, right? So today we're seeing a lot more coming out in the media that's saying maybe it wasn't this and wasn't that, not to be too graphic, right? Maybe this wasn't as dangerous, or maybe that this it is transmissible. Even the word vaccine, right, can come into question. So I think back then, everyone was unified. It was a great feeling in the country. So instituting a mandate seemed like the great American thing to do, right? That I recall, it was a very patriotic feeling. Everyone was unified. But now it's much different today, where we have real information and much more data coming out about what really wasn't true and what wasn't based on any data at all. And there are statements by certain government agencies, starting with the letter F, that we know now to be not based on any reality or any testing. So I think we have to look at that. And of course, the courts, depending where you are in the country, it's very interesting. The courts can have differing opinions and a heavy amount of bias. And so my focus is always just at the street level for business. What do we do to protect you, to see really what's happening, to make sure that you don't fall prey to some of these things that are going on right now, where your liability could be. Because right, what's happening now is that we have different groups. They're great people, but they're pushing employees to file workers' comp claims for anything. I have a rash on my arm, and we got to file a workers' comp claim. And they're also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was gonna bring this up. So DJ was saying we were never unified, and I think that's a fair point, that we're talking about media coverage. It may have seemed like that on the surface there was a lot of buy-in in particular ways, but because I cover censorship, I was on the side of the people who were the outcasts from the beginning. Listening to them, I was hearing what they were saying and listening to their stories and the information like you just shared, in sort of an indirect way about like the FDA, for instance, or Pfizer. A lot of that information was out there long ago, but it's only recently crept into view, I think, because it's been allowed to make it for one reason or another. And we could go all day about why is that the case, which I guess brings us back to the question, which is media coverage or news coverage, and even just in the alternative media world, the guidelines, what they're allowing. Like even YouTube's recently changed its guidelines. So it seems like, well, now we know all this stuff, but we didn't really just find out about it. A lot of people were talking about this years ago. So it's really less so that the information is out there and more so how many people are talking about that information and it being allowed to be discussed, right. I think.
Oh, well, of course, we're treated like infants, with YouTube, especially Facebook. It's monitored, it's filtered. We're spoon-fed what they want. So, that's apparent for many, many years. So that's not a news source that you want to go to. I just urge people to definitely find alternative sources such as yourself as well. But social media now, it's for their own purposes that they're opening things up. Just like the states getting rid of mandates, YouTube cannot help this now. they look complicit if they keep censoring it all. You know, like Robert Malone, for example. You know, so they can't do it any longer because too many people know the truth now, and they're going to seem complicit in their bias.
Yeah, that's interesting. I see what you're saying there. Okay, let's promote some wine and coffee real fast. So since you're good at self-promotion, what do you think is the number one thing someone should tell about their wine?
Well, I think that your wines are fantastic because they're really going to suit your mood, right? We want to have enough of your wine available in our wine cellar to suit the mood you're in at any given time of day. Correct?
Yes, and they're all well, like as you see, the Rogue Malbec. They're all apropos to the conversations we have on the channel. Never before imported, like never before allowed to say this, and now you can have it. The gaucho, which is Kumpa is slang for friend used by the gauchos. That's cowboy. I mean, come on, you can't get better names, and also actually the wine's just really good. I've been saying recently, I just popped open a new bottle of the Rogue Malbec. It's not as high as the Sunal, which is almost 9,000 feet, but it's a 6,000 foot Malbec, and it's also that's considered extreme. All of these fewer pesticides used in the growing of the grapes, and the grapes work harder because they're so high up, close to the sun. Very remote regions of Argentina. I have had all of them. They're all very good. They pair very well with the holiday meals if you're looking for something also to give as a gift. Don't forget AllisonWinePromo.com, and you get 50% off the wines and 50% off shipping. So it's a really good deal. And if you're drinking wine anyway this Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever you're celebrating, come on, you can support the channel and have a great glass of wine while you're at it. Also, there's coffee. I bet Chris drinks a lot of coffee. Do you drink a lot of coffee?
I do.
Seem like a coffee drinker. So get yourself 10% off your first order at twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. These are all USDA certified organic roasts. They're also high altitude roasts. They're grown in Nicaragua. The whole operation's down in Nicaragua. They grow, harvest, and roast the beans. Really awesome family-owned company, small company, pro-free speech. So I love working with them. And you can also get tea. They make a Katura tea, which is tea from the coffee fruit. It's really good. It looks like, let's see if I can, here we go. This is what it looks like. So there's like these the fruit around the coffee bean. It's a kind of interesting. If you've never tried coffee fruit tea, I recommend it. It also would make a great gift. And you know what? Twin Engine does traveler packs. So you can do samples and stuff if you want to. You could do gift cards, but the traveler pack is a pretty good idea too. You can get a bunch of the different roasts and give it as stocking stuffers and whatnot. So go check out twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. Okay. So
well, then don't forget, when you care about your guests, it's Allison wine with dinner and Allison coffee with dessert.
Exactly. Yeah, there you go. Now, I got to say, if you drink coffee with dessert and you're affected by caffeine, they don't have a decaf. But, oh well. Have dessert for breakfast. My granddad used to eat pie for breakfast all the time. And coffee goes great with pie. You can't do better. But as my dad and I do this Dr. Dad series on locals, so everybody go over to AllisonMorrow.locals.com, as I was saying, and you get Dr. Dad. We've been doing that every Sunday. So we do health and living topics, medical topics, that kind of thing. We just did how if you want to substitute with maple syrup instead of sugar, that would be much better for your health. So, okay, let's go over and take some questions here. If an independent contractor has a contract with a municipality and that municipality requires proof of vaccination, is that municipality or any other business requiring the vaccine to work in, especially in California, considered an employee that can be held liable? So a question, I guess, about contracting.
Right. Well, if the state is mandating it, right, or the municipality, then you have no choice. So it's that there's not as much potential liability for you if you can pin it on somebody else. It's when there's no other mandate in place. So you have to follow the guideline to keep your subcontractor status. So it's just like as if you are an employer then, even though you're working for them as a sub. So I would think the same rule applies.
Okay, let's take this. Well, I think that was more of a comment. Hello, Allison. Robert Barnes posted an interesting article with 3 people on a similar subject in his brief some days ago, covering all possibilities for the injured, including claims. My question would be, since there is a possibility of a claim versus lawsuit applicable where no suing is possible and attorney's fees are covered by insurance carrier and worker injury claims, what would have to be necessary conditions to be met for a U.S. worker to claim? In effect, what wording of a mandate meets the lowest criteria for a claim to go through?
Well, it could be even a suggestion. Remember, even a suggestion that your employer would like you to get vaccinated is enough. And it doesn't even have to be a written policy, I don't believe. And I've checked with a number of seasoned attorneys about this. So it doesn't even have to be a written policy, just as a strong suggestion that your boss would really like everyone to be vaccinated. And then we talk about the claims there. But remember, there's a difference between the workers' comp claim, which is totally, all the legal fees are covered. It's a whole system. You have no money out of pocket. But when it comes to and a discrimination claim, that's a whole different story. Your legal fees aren't covered. Remember, workers' comp premiums too, even if you don't pay out of pocket now, but you have an experience rating. So the more, just like a bad driver. So the more claims you have against your workers' comp policy, the more you're going to pay in the future exponentially. And so that's one thing you have to remember. So even though you think, oh, it's workers' comp, I'm not worried about it. Well, that's not true, because you're going to have experience rating insurance increases in the future.
Okay. There are a couple questions I think we're going to take off of the YouTube platform. I think we pretty basically answered this one. This was the general question. Are companies liable for imposing vaccine mandates? I was kicked out of a conference as an AV person because the folks holding the conference were demanding anyone in the conference room show proof of COVID vaccination. That was in Florida, a state which didn't enforce a vaccine mandate, held in a hotel that didn't demand a vaccine. That's kind of interesting. If you're doing it when there's not a government policy and even the site doesn't require it.
Right. And so that's the situation we're in New York right now. So we have companies that might impose it. And does that increase the amount of liability? That company in Florida, if they're imposing on their employees, really wants to check what they're doing, because they might not realize the potential that they have for liability in the future.
Who is liable when a company hires a doctor who gives incorrect information? Let's start there.
That's more of a legal question, to be honest with you. Again, if the company hires a professional, the company's responsible. You know what I'm saying? They're the ones that are hiring the person. Usually that's the case if they're hiring a professional.
Okay. Let's see. My company had a Q&A on the employee website with a video from a doctor who said the vaccines were FDA approved. This was in January 2021. Both the company and the doctor said to consult your own physician with any questions. Is this a way for both the company and doctor to avoid liability?
I think I need more information and would have an attorney look at that with me, to be honest.
Okay. I think we're not. Okay. I think we're not going to take any more on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching. Go check out Whalen CPA if you want to contact Chris if you've got any business questions, tax questions, liability for your business, anything else you want to say on YouTube, Chris, before we take a couple more questions on the other platforms.
Thanks for watching, and I'll see you when we turn it over to Rumble.
Okay, here we go.